from Florence could see sustained tropical force winds from Michael. Winds will be strong enough to bring down trees weakened by Florence, especially with saturated ground. Winds will be strong enough to rip tarps from roofs on homes damaged by Florence. Coastal areas can also expect storm surge and coastal flooding. Beaches already weakened by Florence's towering surge may be especially vulnerable. Rain will increase across our state today, with the hardest rain expected Thursday and Thursday night. As much as 7 inches of rain could fall in some areas, and the whole state will be getting some rain. Heavy rain could cause flash flooding and river flooding. And if you live in an area where flooding has happened before, you need to keep a close eye on the forecast, and you need to be ready to evacuate if you're told to do so. The last thing people cleaning up from Florence need right now is more wind and rain. But this storm is coming, and we will be ready for it. This morning, I've declared a state of emergency for Hurricane Michael. This allows state resources to be used to help local governments respond to the storm. I've also ordered that certain restrictions for trucks and heavy equipment be waived. This helps storm response vehicles moving in and through our state, and also helps farmers who are yet again working to move crops and livestock ahead of the storm. I have activated the National Guard. 150 National Guard troops will report for duty this afternoon. We are grateful for their service. And again, this week, we mourn with them the loss of Sergeant James Allen Slape, a member of the North Carolina National Guard, who fell while serving in Afghanistan last week. I talked to his family yesterday. They are all in our thoughts and prayers, and we are grateful for their sacrifice and Sergeant Slape's bravery. So now, to tell you more about the efforts to prepare for Hurricane Michael and what you can do to prepare, here is Emergency Management Director Mike Sprayberry. Mike?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. The State Emergency Operations Center will raise its activation level up to a 3 today at 1 p.m. This means we'll be operating on a 24-hour basis and have the NCEM team and other members of our state emergency response team here at the EOC, as well as our FEMA liaison, to ensure that we are prepared to respond to the impacts from Hurricane Michael. We continue to monitor Hurricane Michael closely and remain in close contact with the National Hurricane Center to ensure that we have the latest data. State emergency assets have been called and alerted and are prepared to deploy as needed. As the governor noted, we have positioned North Carolina National Guard soldiers and vehicles in key locations throughout the state to ensure that they can be ready if needed for flood response operations. Our logistic warehouses have been activated in the event that commodities are required. We all need to remember that while this storm won't be as powerful as Hurricane Florence, when it reaches us, it will still be dangerous. It can cause power outages, downed trees, flash floods, tornadoes, and riverine flooding. Let's ensure that we're all prepared at the individual, local, and state level. To that end, we make the following recommendations. Please have your family emergency kit ready and make sure it's been restocked if you used it during Florence. If you have questions regarding what should be in the kit, download the ReadyNC app on your smartphone. It'll let you know what should be in the emergency kit. It'll help you locate open shelters and provide you with other preparedness tips. You should also use the NCEM Flood Inundation Mapping and Alert Network, known as FIMAN, to ensure that you are aware of potential flooding in your area by logging in at fiman.nc.gov. That's fiman.nc.gov. You can also sign up to be alerted by text or email when the rivers or streams begin to rise near you. Also, follow the instructions of your local officials and stay tuned to local local media to make sure that you have situational awareness. And as always, thank you for your support of the North Carolina State Emergency Response Team. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mike. We have part of our Hurricane Michael response team here, and we'll take any questions about Hurricane Michael that you might have for us. Anybody? Okay, they'll give you a microphone. Let them give you a microphone. Yep.
Any idea of how many houses right now are blue tarped in eastern North Carolina? And what are you doing about folks who actually may be threatened in this storm from the wind and rain because their homes are full?
So we are still in the process of providing more tarps to the counties as requested, so we don't have a really strong number about how many folks have a blue tarp on their roofs, but we're still working closely with the counties to provide them as requested.
One of the reasons for the warning today is to let people know ahead of time that this may be a problem. I've seen a lot of blue tarps as I've traveled across the state. A lot of volunteer groups are helping people get their homes back, and many contractors are out there, and so we're providing them the warning that these tropical storm force winds could cause problems there. Yes, sir. Here.
Two quick things. The state of emergency is for the entire state?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then, I don't know if this is for you or Mike, regarding shelters, do you envision or have a contingency plan to reopen shelters? Do you think it's going to be that level of rain or wind or damage that could warrant that?
We're prepared to open more shelters as necessary. There's still 11 shelters in operation from Hurricane Florence. I'm not going to say whether or not we anticipate opening more. It just depends on how the storm acts as it moves through the state.
Michael Hyman from CBS 17. Are you all making any recommendations regarding the state fair beginning tomorrow with people who may be traveling while this storm is coming through?
We have not made any recommendations regarding the state fair.
Given that probably some of the same people are involved in the initial responses are involved in the recovery, is this delaying anything with Florence, whether it be moving people out of shelters, any of the number crunching that has to happen to get the money flowing? What sort of setback is this for Florence recovery?
Well, we know that people who are trying to fix things on the ground and trying to find people places to live, that this storm complicates things. But if you'll stay for my budget presentation, the fact that we have now had 2 major storms within 23 months, we want to do a little something extra regarding making sure that we can focus on recovery while still being able to respond at peak capacity to the response in a storm, since both of them are centered right here in emergency management. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my budget proposal.
I know during Florence, roads were a big issue. 995 was closed for a period of time. Are you preparing to do? Are you or NCDOT preparing to do anything special ahead of Michael to make sure these roads are making people travel on roads that may be dangerous?
The Department of Transportation will be on ready to deal with flooded roads as conditions warrant. They're still making some repairs on roads. We had 2,500 roads that were closed in Florence. They've done a remarkable job getting many of them back up and running, but they will be prepared in the event that we have any road closures from Michael.
How much do you think that will set things back in terms of repairing those roads?
We'll just have to wait and see how severe the storm is. One thing that's much more positive about Michael than Florence is that it's scheduled to move through the state at a much more rapid pace, leaving less rain. The potential rainfall totals have crept up a little bit overnight, but still the storm is anticipated to be gone from North Carolina by Friday. And we think that that will be a positive when we're talking about overall rain totals that could affect flooded roads.
You said that you haven't made any recommendations for the state fair yet. Are you guys watching that? Is there any plan for that if things were to get pretty bad on Thursday and opening day?
You know, Commissioner Troxler and his department are working on the state fair, and I would direct those questions to him. I imagine that if Wynn got to a certain situation, they might deal with certain rides, or I don't know the answer to that. I'm speaking out of my league, so you'd have to talk to Commissioner Troxler. Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate Lee Williamson providing American Sign Language, and I appreciate the tremendous work that this team has done during Hurricane Florence and now as they get ready for Hurricane Matthew. So thank you, guys.
But if it is not safe to leave your home, don't leave. The worst thing you can do now is leave and put yourself and your family in danger. Now we are focused on the response and recovery from this storm. We have 54 shelters open across the Panhandle and Big Bend. More will open depending on need. As soon as Michael passes, we will have a massive wave of response and support coming down and around the Panhandle. We'll have more than 1,000 search and rescue personnel deploying immediately after Michael passes. We now have 3,500 National Guard members activated and staged. These soldiers are absolutely ready to help. 135 Fish and Wildlife Commission officers are ready for deployment and will respond with a variety of specialized equipment, including shallow draft boats, ATVs, airboats, and four-wheel drive vehicles. The Florida Highway Patrol has pre-positioned 100 troopers and has nearly 300 troopers available for deployment across the Panhandle. They have transitioned to 12-hour shifts as part of the response. Law enforcement will also be manning bridges to make sure that when conditions become too dangerous, the bridges are closed. Listen to these officers. Law enforcement and our National Guard around our state are heroes, and so many will be leaving their families and placing themselves in danger during this storm to help others. We are so grateful for their dedication. The Florida Department of Transportation has dozens of crews staged to push down from the north and clear roads so even more supplies and rescue personnel can get to impacted areas. Right now, the Florida Department of Transportation is closely monitoring U.S. Highway 98 as well as all bridges. Engineering plans are being developed to rebuild vital areas of highway. We will work around the clock to make sure that roads and bridges reopen as quickly as possible. We have trucks loaded with tons of food, water, and other critical supplies ready to move in. We will deploy medical assistance teams, and we have hospital augmentation teams to make sure the medically needy are safe and receiving care. The Florida Department of Health currently has 3 special needs shelter augmentation teams with 22 staff in place. We have 18 ambulance strike teams with 90 ambulances. We have 3 federal disaster medical assistance teams with 105 staff, 5 disaster management assistance strike teams with 35 staff, 3 disaster management assistance team task forces with 42 staff, But if it is not safe to leave your home, don't leave. The worst thing you can do now is leave and put yourself and your family in danger. Now we are focused on the response and recovery from this storm. We have 54 shelters open across the Panhandle and Big Bend. More will open depending on need. As soon as Michael passes, we will have a massive wave of response and support coming down and around the Panhandle. We'll have more than 1,000 search and rescue personnel deploying immediately after Michael passes. We now have 3,500 National Guard members activated and staged. These soldiers are absolutely ready to help. 135 Fish and Wildlife Commission officers are ready for deployment and will respond with a variety of specialized equipment, including shallow draft boats, ATVs, airboats, and four-wheel drive vehicles. The Florida Highway Patrol has pre-positioned 100 troopers and has nearly 300 troopers available for deployment across the Panhandle. They have transitioned to 12-hour shifts as part of the response. Law enforcement will also be manning bridges to make sure that when conditions become too dangerous, the bridges are closed. Listen to these officers. Law enforcement and our National Guard around our state are heroes, and so many will be leaving their families and placing themselves in danger during this storm to help others. We are so grateful for their dedication. The Florida Department of Transportation has dozens of crews staged to push down from the north and clear roads so even more supplies and rescue personnel can get to impacted areas. Right now, the Florida Department of Transportation is closely monitoring U.S. Highway 98 as well as all bridges. Engineering plans are being developed to rebuild vital areas of highway. We will work around the clock to make sure that roads and bridges reopen as quickly as possible. We have trucks loaded with tons of food, water, and other critical supplies ready to move in. We will deploy medical assistance teams, and we have hospital augmentation teams to make sure the medically needy are safe and receiving care. The Florida Department of Health currently has 3 special needs shelter augmentation teams with 22 staff in place. We have 18 ambulance strike teams with 90 ambulances. We have 3 federal disaster medical assistance teams with 105 staff, 5 disaster management assistance strike teams with 35 staff, 3 disaster management assistant team task forces with 42 staff. The Florida Department of Health has also contracted with the International Medical Corps to obtain additional resources for assistance, including 50 nurses, 2 hospital emergency department teams, and 1 emergency hospital. The Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration is in contact with healthcare facilities to ensure they have the resources they need. You've heard me say all week how important it is to get the lights back on after the storm. There are 19,000 personnel staged to begin utility restoration, and we will be posting power outage numbers from every utility. Getting power back on is absolutely critical to our recovery and response effort, and it is a top priority. We've also focused on keeping all communication lines open, and we are not seeing any communication outages right now. We're also thankfully not seeing any widespread fuel shortages or outages. Following the storm, we will have resources available to quickly make sure fuel is moving to where it's needed. The State Emergency Response Team has been holding regular calls with the fuel industry and ports in Florida to ensure they can get gas to all areas safely. Floridians can download the app Gas Buddy to check where fuel is available. President Trump has approved the pre-landfall disaster request we made on Monday, and that will help with resources and response. I just spoke with the President, who again offered all available federal resources. We continue to be in constant contact with FEMA and their team in the State Emergency Operations Center. That includes experts from Homeland Security, the EPA, the Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, and the Army Corps of Engineers. Along our coast, communities are going to see unimaginable devastation. Think about the devastation we've seen before with storms like Hurricane Irma. The Panhandle and Big Bend will see winds in excess of 145 miles per hour. Think about that, 145 miles per hour. Again, Hurricane Michael is forecast to be the most destructive storm to hit the Florida Panhandle in a century. The storm will bring torrential rain to most of the Panhandle and Big Bend, which means flooding will be a major issue. Expect to see 12 inches of rain in some areas of the Panhandle. So think about that, a foot of rain in some parts of the Panhandle. Again, prepare for major flooding from this storm. The National Hurricane Center is forecasting storm surge to be between 9 and 13 feet. That means the water will come miles inshore and could easily rise over the roofs of houses. Much of the rest of the Gulf Coast will see between 2 and 6 feet of storm surge, which is still life-threatening. Remember, we can rebuild your house, but we cannot rebuild your life. Take this seriously. Keep your family safe. The state is not taking this storm lightly, and neither should any family in the state. Our state will continue to do whatever it takes to make sure that every family and every visitor in Florida is safe after the storm. But I can't say enough. Listen to local officials. Listen to local officials. You do not want to be the person who survives the storm just to put your life or your family's life at risk after it passes because you didn't listen to local officials. During a storm, first responders cannot come out and save you. It's too dangerous. Now is the time to prioritize to keep your family safe. Do not take chances. So, let's all be safe, stay alert to weather updates, watch this storm closely, listen to local officials. We all have families. I'm a dad and I'm a grandfather. My family is the most important thing to me, and I cannot imagine anything happen to them. I don't want anything to happen to any family in this state. During disasters, Floridians take care of each other. We've seen that time and time again. We saw this after Hermine, Matthew, Irma, and Maria. Floridians are strong. Floridians are resilient. There is nothing our state cannot recover from because there's no state that cares, loves, or comes together like Florida. Hurricane Michael cannot beat Florida. Visit floridadisaster.org for information on shelter and emergency assistance following the storm. You can visit fl511.com for current road conditions. Families can also call the State Emergency Information Line for assistance. You can also follow us at FLCERT or FLGovScott on Twitter for live updates on Michael. Con la llegada de este huracán, lo más importante que cada familia puede hacer es tener un plan. I'll be glad to answer any questions. This is devastating.
Governor, there's a lot of political ads airing right now, including the one criticizing Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum for his response to Hermine. Should those be airing during the storm?
You can talk to individual campaigns. I'm spending my time. I'm spending my time getting the state ready. Now I'm going to spend my time recovering.
Governor, your schedule said you spoke to someone in Bay County. Is that it looks like that's where it's going to have a great deal of impact.
Well, we still got 6 hours, so it all depends on where it moves. But I mean, Apalachicola is already getting big storm surge. I mean, I think it's might be worse one place than the other, but golly, it's going to be horrible. I mean, all along that area. Whether look at whether you get 6 foot of storm surge or 13 foot of storm surge, it's deadly.
Do you have a sense of how many people haven't evacuated in areas they need to?
No, when I left Franklin yesterday, that was the city I went to yesterday. They were saying there's still, like one of the islands, they're telling me there's still 50 people sitting on the island, and they've talked to them, and they've sent sheriff's deputies down to talk to them, and they're not going to evacuate, and so I'm scared to death for them. So I hope nobody keeps any kids down anywhere. I mean, it's one thing for an adult to make a decision. I just hope no one made the decision for a child. Yes, sir.
Hi. Has there been, when you spoke with President Trump, did he make any mention of his ongoing conflict with Andrew Gillum and the war of words they kind of had between each other just recently, just as the storm has been arriving?
I talked to the president just, 10 or 15 minutes ago, and all he talked about was making sure we had all the federal resources. Yeah.
There was an email that went out yesterday to some local officials that seemed to raise concerns about whether they were really ready. Are you concerned? Like, what is the problem there, and why weren't they ready?
You know, I think people are getting ready. I think this thing happened fast. I mean, if you look at how fast this thing happened, it wasn't like Irma, where I don't know how many days, but we had a long time, or when what was happening with Florence was coming for a week. This one happened very quickly, and I think I think everybody's pushing as hard as they can to get everybody ready. I think whether it's state, federal, local resources, everybody's doing, trying to get everybody ready. So.
The start of hurricane season, or I don't
know. My job is, my job was to do everything I could to get people to evacuate, help people get ready. What we're doing here is respond to whatever needs anybody has. We'll do everything we can. What I'm worried about now is I want everybody to survive. I don't want anybody to lose their life during this storm, and then we got to keep everybody safe afterwards. So.
We'll take one more question. Governor, I wanted to ask you, you've been preparing, and all of a sudden there's nothing else you can do but wait. What is that like personally and as governor?
Well, you pray that everybody listened, and maybe it'll be less. Hopefully, we prepared something worse than what's going to be. I don't know, but I think today is making sure that we're ready for the response. We have. You can see them today even coming in, but we got recovery and response teams ready to deploy. I know I've talked to utilities. I didn't talk to them this morning, but I've talked to them yesterday, and they're still getting more utility workers ready. But if you look at all the resources, people are getting ready. Now the question is going to be is how bad will it be? We've got to do a good job with deploying them. But once this happens, people have got to be cautious. There's going to be down trees, down power lines, flooding. We're going to have all these issues. So survive this storm, and then don't do anything foolish. And I know the locals are going to work their tail off to keep people safe. We're going to do everything we can and send people out to keep people safe. I'm praying to God people will be safe.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, we got everybody here? Okay. Good morning. Unfortunately, Hurricane Michael is a hurricane of the worst kind. There's nothing else that can be said about it. We're looking at 145 mile an hour sustained winds. It could possibly get stronger. Major hurricanes cause large losses of life and the most amount of destruction that hurricanes can bring forward. So unfortunately, the window to evacuate is coming to a close. If it hasn't already done so for many of the citizens that are in Florida. If you failed to heed a warning for any reason, your goal should be to elevate as high as you can and get into a facility that you think can withstand the winds at this point and hope for the best. You always have the option of calling 911, but there's no guarantee that responders can get to you at this point, as the system, continues to push through. What I mean by the storm being the type, the worst type, not only are we going to see devastating storm surge push through Florida, which causes the most amount of destruction to facilities along the coast, but the high winds as well. The Florida Building Code of 2001 went up to basically Cat 3 standards, so anything built after 2001 is designed to really handle Cat 3 and not much more after that. So we're going to see a lot of wind damage. And particularly the buildings that were built before 2001, you're going to see a lot of wind damage as this storm brings 145 mile an hour winds inland. The other, if not the worst storm that the state has seen, and it's going to pass through and impact numerous counties. High winds are going to impact the vegetation that's there, bringing down trees, bringing down power lines with them, and they need to be prepared. Not only Florida, but also Georgia needs to be prepared to see the power off for multiple weeks as this system pushes through. Another unfortunate aspect is the rainfall that's going to be associated with this storm as it pushes through South and North Carolina. Hopefully the forward speed of the storm will reduce the amount of rainfall that South Carolina and North Carolina sees, but as you all know, Florence passed through. The Cape Fear River and other river basins have yet to recede back to normal river levels, and any amount of rainfall through South and North Carolina is not welcomed. But unfortunately, it's going to be a reality, and it's going to cause problems as it pushes through as well. So right now, FEMA has nearly 3,000 people in the field. That doesn't include all of our federal partners that are there. We're doing everything that we can to pre-position not only incident management teams and disaster medical teams, but also rotary aircraft to support search and rescue missions. We have search and rescue teams staged to be able to move into Florida and to the areas highly impacted in Florida, but also as well. In regards to commodities, the state of Florida has strong capability that we're working hand in hand with right now. They have staging and distribution capability in Orlando. We've staged commodities and teams in Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama as well as Atlanta. Can do so and push through. The great communication, just got off the phone with Governor Scott. The governor is leaning forward, doing everything that he can to position the state to be able to help his citizens. Last night, they made a very good move by using the wireless emergency alert system to let people know that this storm is getting stronger and stronger and you need to leave. This is the final call for anybody that needs to get out. Try to do so. Those who stick around to experience storm surge don't typically live to tell about it, unfortunately. And with that, again, I want to reiterate, it's a whole community effort, not only the response part, but the recovery. It's going to take neighbor helping neighbor, citizens getting involved that haven't been impacted, donating their time and their money to help citizens recover all the way up to the federal government. So we ask you always to download the FEMA app. Go to disasterassistance.gov if you're, receive impacts from the storm. And then also go to nvoad.org, nvoad.org, if you're looking to volunteer and help those in need. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our friends over at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Ken, come on.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And Michael did strengthen overnight to Category 4, 145-mile-an-hour winds. It's important to not focus just on the core of the storm. This is a huge storm. We're looking at a 200-mile wind spread from the center. So tropical storm force winds will be pulling out into portions of Alabama, even into portions of central Florida. And this is going to be a devastating storm, possibly historical. We're looking at storm surge flooding of 9 to 14 feet, and that's going to impact the areas. Fortunately, though, high tide will be occurring late tonight, but water at that level will push a lot of inundation into the coastal communities in Florida. And then once the storm passes to the north, we're looking at hurricane-force winds getting up into portions of Georgia. There's likely going to be widespread power outages, downed trees, power lines, and structural damage, and the threat for tornadoes along the track of Michael. As we get into Thursday and into Friday, the heavy rain threat pushes into the Carolinas. We're looking at 9 rivers specifically that were impacted from Florence are likely to see additional flooding. Fortunately, this is not expected to stall. It will be moving quickly offshore, so any flooding that does occur should be short-lived, and then Michael will be pulling out to sea by this weekend. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ken. Next we have Captain Kaylee Benson with our partners over at the U.S. Coast Guard.
Good morning. We urge everyone in the path of Hurricane Michael to stay off the water, stay off the beaches, and heed all safety messages and evacuation orders from state and local authorities. Coast Guard is working in close coordination with our federal, state, and local partners to prepare for the arrival of the hurricane. And rest assured, captains of the port throughout all of the expected impacted areas and their teams have been working in close coordination with their respective maritime sectors in order to safely manage maritime operations and control the flow of cargo and supplies into each of the affected states in advance of the storm. And we are closing ports to vessel traffic and cargo operations as is necessary and based on the storm's movement. So as of this moment, Panama City, Pensacola, and Cedar Key are closed to commercial vessel traffic. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Captain. Next, Ray Alexander with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you, Administrator Long. Good morning. Ray Alexander, Army Corps. The Corps of Engineers is fully integrated with the federal response and our fellow federal partners and our state and local stakeholders as well. Currently, we're in support of 3 FEMA mission assignments valued at over $1.4 million and another over $140,000 of our own flood control authorities. Brigadier General Diana Holland, the Commanding General for our South Atlantic Division, headquartered in Atlanta. She has the lead for the fight. She'll be at FEMA Region 4 today. Our district headquarters in Wilmington, Jacksonville, Savannah, and Mobile have activated, and those district commanders are out and about pre-storm. We have key leaders, liaison officers, technical subject matter experts located at state emergency operations centers and other key local and critical nodes throughout the area. In terms of dam and levee safety, currently we're assessing potential impacts to the 29 flood risk projects we have in the projected path. Right now, our assessment of our reservoirs, we have sufficient capacity to receive the rainfall. We are reviewing the